and welcome to the City Council, Norman Utilities Authority, Norman Municipal Authority, and Norman Tax Increment Finance Authority meeting of February 12, 2019. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Councilmember Bierman.
Here.
Councilmember Carter.
Here.
Councilmember Castleberry.
Here.
Councilmember Hickman.
Here.
Councilmember Wilson.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Holman.
Here.
Councilmember Scott.
Here.
Mayor Miller.
Here. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item number 3 is approval of the City Council Community Planning and Transportation Committee minutes of October 25th, November 29th, and January 15th. City Council Conference minutes of November 13th, 2018, and January 8th of 2019. City Council Special Session minutes of December 18th and January 15th and 29th. 2019, City Council Norman Utilities Authority, Norman Municipal Authority, and Norman Tax Increment Finance Authority minutes of January 22nd, 2019. I need a motion to approve these minutes.
Approved.
Second.
Motion on the floor is to approve the minutes by a show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed? Same sign. That was unanimous. Is the Oklahoma Municipal League Awards for employees with 25 years of service. I'll entertain a motion to allow the presentation of the awards.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. That was you. We have several members from OML that are here. We have the Executive Director, Mike Fina, who is here to present the awards, and our new President of the OML Board, Randy Ross, and we're really glad to have him, and also Nancy Morse, who's also on the staff of OML and is a Norman resident. So we appreciate your gentlemen being here. This is really an important recognition for our staff, and we appreciate your sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor. We appreciate the opportunity to come tonight, and thank you for allowing us to be at the council meeting. I'm a little blown away. I'm very impressed by the number of women on your council. This is not typical of our councils around Oklahoma, so bravo. So I guess I have to put my plug in for that. We started a women in municipal government group with OML this year. So, and Bria has been very active in getting that started, and so have you, Mayor. So all you other ladies, I would encourage you to participate. So there's my plug for OML. Tonight we're here to honor employees that have been with the city for 25 years or more. I think this is very important that we recognize this. Something, I've been the director for almost 2 years now, and one thing that I've tried to instill in our communities as we go visit them, that as we refer to our municipal employees, that we coin a different term. And we call them municipal professionals, because our folks that work in city halls around the state have made a conscious effort to make this their profession. And we see this more and more with these 25-year awards, that people are spending their careers in municipal government. And I think that's very important to note, that they have made this conscious effort to be a professional in the municipal world. So I call them municipal professionals. And so it's our award that we're giving our municipal professionals tonight. So thank you for letting us be here to do that. Randy, if you wanted to say anything.
No, just really want to enhance the time that they have left with the city. We couldn't do it without the city employees, and I know that you all take them in special circumstances, and that's the most important thing. Take those employees, because a lot of them don't get the glamour that you do. They don't get the pictures that you do, but we depend on them for all the services and all the things that they do for us. So with that, we're ready.
All right. Mayor, did you want to join us and we'll take some pictures with them? Would that be okay? Okay. I don't know who all we have here tonight. So why don't we do this? Is Mr. Gary Allison here tonight? No? How about Mr. Mike Carter?
But we've got some people sitting back there.
Okay. Is it Mark Castell? No? My goodness. Okay. How about David Randolph?
Oh, I win.
All right, David, come on. David, congratulations. Thank you. Let me get your, I bet it's down here at the bottom.
I'll take all three.
You'll take, that's fine. That means you get 75 years worth of, did I get the right one here? Nope.
It's all fire department. It's the same.
It's all the fire.
Yeah, just make sure.
And where is Mark? I heard he was-
Have you heard of this wonderful thing called Netflix? Probably.
Yeah.
David, here's a certificate recognizing it, and then your 25-year plan on behalf of the Oklahoma Municipal League. So I want to congratulate you for that. So,
Congratulations
sir.
so much.
Thank you so much for your service.
and now we need you to have a picture with us, if that'd be
Come over
good.
here.
Come in here. Or I'll get over here.
All right.
There we go.
Ready?
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. How about Fire Captain Michael Schofield? Where are you?
There he is. Come on down. Should be him right there.
No? There we go. Michael, thank you for your service.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
There's your certificate. 25 years.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Now we get
My
over
pleasure.
here. Hey, get in here with.
I did it again.
All right.
Another 25 years.
I know what you guys do. Thank you very much.
Very much.
I think that's our last one.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Council, thank you so much for this opportunity tonight. Oh.
And congratulations to our longtime employees, and we hope you're with us a lot longer. This brings us. They're
smiling.
They're smiling, okay. This brings us to item 5, the consent docket. This item is placed on the agenda so that the city council, by unanimous consent, can designate those routine agenda items that they wish to be approved or acknowledged by one motion. Need a motion to place items 6 through 29 on the consent docket.
So moved. Second.
All those in favor, raise your right hand. Those opposed, same sign. That was unanimous. Item number 6 is an ordinance upon first reading, amending the city code to add Article 11 to Chapter 10, titled Utility Vegetation Management, and setting forth notice requirements and best management practice for vegetation management and maintenance activities by utility companies operating in public rights-of-way. Item 7 is an ordinance amending the city code by adding Article 10 to Chapter 10, establishing regulations to protect healthy and significant trees in the public streets and rights-of-way, providing for definitions, providing provisions for applications to remove trees, and providing for the severability thereof. Item 8 is bid and contract with Streets LLC in the amount of $204,821 for the Norman Data Center HVAC replacement project and associated bonds, adopting a resolution granting tax-exempt status and budget appropriation from the capital fund balance and budget transfer between project accounts. Item 9 is a bid and a contract with H&H Plumbing and Utilities in the amount of $2,330,500 and associated bonds for the 24th Avenue East Waterline Relocation Project Phase 2, and resolution granting tax exempt status. Item 10 is submission and acknowledgement receipt of acknowledging receipt of Oklahoma Department of Environmental Quality water line permit for the Robinson Street Water Line Replacement Project Phase 2. located between Crossroads Boulevard and the Robinson Street Water Tower west of 36th Avenue. Item 11 is a final plat for Bioside East Park Addition, Section 2, and acceptance of public dedications contained therein. Located in the east side of Flood Avenue, north of the intersection of Flood Avenue and 24th Avenue Northwest. Item 12, declaration of surplus and/or obsolete equipment and materials and authorizing the sale or disposal thereof. Item 13 is acceptance of a donation in the amount of $2,118.89 from Annie's Rescue House to be used at the Norman Animal Welfare Center and budget appropriation. Item 14 is a special claim submitted by Oklahoma Natural Gas Company in the amount of $6,600 for damage to a light pole and wires as a result of an incident with a sanitation department truck at 625 North Berry Road. Item 15, authorization for expenditure number 6 under the contract with Lemke Land Surveying in the amount not to exceed $55,000 to provide surveying and drafting services for the sewer maintenance project FYE 18. Item 16 is amendment number 1 to a contract with Tyler Technologies, Inc., formerly New World, Inc., for a substitution of services and software, a substitution of parties, and providing for a final payment amount and date for the computer-aided dispatch, police records management services, and mobile data network project. Item 17 is a change order number 2 to a contract with Crossland Heavy Contractors, Inc., decreasing the contract by $11,006.90 for a revised contract price of $652,853.56 on the lift station modifications FY17 project and final acceptance of the project. Item 18 is the final acceptance and final payment of the contract with Instu Form for the St. James Park Section 5 Edition 48-inch reinforced concrete pipe storm sewer pipe rehabilitation project. Item 19, final acceptance and final payment of the contract with MTZ Construction for the Burlington Drive Drainage Improvement Project. Item 20 is an amendment with one to a contract with Rose Rock Veterinary Hospital and Pet Resort to extend the contract until June 30th, 2019 to provide professional veterinarian services for the Norman Animal Welfare Center. Item 21 is amendment number 1 to a contract with Spayway Clinic, extending the contract until June 30th, 2019 to provide off-site spay and neuter services for the Norman Animal Welfare Center. Item 22 is change order number 1 to a contract with Sun Construction Services, Inc., increasing the contract amount by $1,581.78 for a revised contract amount of $36,665.77 for the Building C restroom renovation Americans with Disabilities Act compliance project and final acceptance of the project. Item 23 is a contract with Constellation New Energy Gas Division, LLC, a term sheet for the sale of biogas environmental attributes. Item 24 is a contract with Cove Environmental to provide whole toxicity evaluation testing services and other biomonitoring services on a unit price basis for a period of 1 year. Item 25 is a contract with Crossing the Chasm LLC in the amount of $113,400 to be paid monthly in 16 equal installments of $7,087.50, subject to annual appropriation of sufficient funding by the Norman City Council to perform and provide professional consultation services related to the Americans with Disabilities Act compliance efforts for the City of Norman. Item 26 is a contract with the Norman Adult Sports Association for the operation of adult softball and football flag football leagues at Reeves Park. Item 27 is a resolution appropriating $103,800 from the Westwood Fund balance to be used for the operation of the Westwood Golf Course Restaurant. Item 28 is a resolution authorizing joint petition settlement of workers' compensation claim filed by Richard Hartless, directing the legal department to file settlement and attendant cost in Workers' Compensation Commission, and authorizing and directing the finance director to purchase Workers' Compensation Commission judgment from the Risk Management Insurance Fund. Item 29 is a resolution appropriating $357,029 from the general fund balance to the net revenue stabilization fund, the rainy day fund, in order to maintain the projected target fund balance as recommended by the City Council Finance Committee. I need a motion to approve or reject the consent docket.
Motion to approve.
Second.
At this time, I'd like to recognize Sarita Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Miller. On the council's consent agenda tonight is acceptance of a donation from Annie's Rescue House, also known as Annie's Rescue Foundation, to be used at the Norman Animal Welfare Center and budget appropriation. I am the executive director of Annie's Rescue Foundation. The City of Norman Ethics Ordinance directs council members to recuse on items in which they have an actual conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest. I have consulted with the city attorney's office on this matter, and while I do not believe that I have an actual conflict of interest or pecuniary interest that may vary with the outcome of council's decision on this item, it is possible that a conflict of interest could be perceived due to any action I might take on this item. To remove the potential perception of such conflict of interest, I am requesting to recuse on item 13 and ask that my colleagues vote to accept my request for recusal on this particular item.
I need a motion to allow Councilmember Wilson to abstain.
So moved.
Second.
The motion on the floor is to allow Councilmember Wilson to abstain from voting on item 13. Are there any comments from the council? The motion on the floor is to approve the consent docket. Council members, you may cast your vote. Oh,
Let her recuse.
I went forward.
Motion's-
The motion on the floor is to allow Councilmember Wilson to abstain from voting on item 13. You may cast your vote. Do we raise hands or? You may cast your votes.
Are we raising hands or are we?
This should be like a Sarita vote.
All votes have been cast and the motion passes unanimously to allow Councilmember Wilson to abstain from voting on item 13.
Okay, now, are there any comments from the council regarding any items on the consent docket? Motion on the floor is to approve. Robert, Councilmember Castleberry.
Just a couple of questions. On items 20 and 21. Okay, we probably have different questions. Can somebody kind of talk about that? We're extending the contract. I'm more budget is what I'm concerned about. Is if we're renewing the contract, why are we've got the money in there. Seems like if we're extending the contract, we shouldn't have the money in the budget. So how does the budget work with extending this contract? I mean, I assume we budgeted for what the contract was. If we knew the contract was going to expire, have we just not used all of it, or?
Well, Keith Humphrey, Chief of Police. I think I understand what you're asking, but keep in mind, we were expecting to have a vet on staff by now, and that vet will not be here until April the 1st. And so until she gets up to speed, we believe that we need to contract out for some of these services so that we will not miss a beat when she comes.
And I'm fine with that. I'm just from a budget standpoint. How can we have money in the budget to do this? Are we not providing us spay and neuter?
Yeah, we've always done this with the spay and neuter because sometimes we get so many animals, it is impossible for the vet to keep up sometimes. So this allows us to stay on track so that we won't get so far behind, and we're able to keep more animals prepared for adoption. So we've done this each year.
No, I'm fine with that. I guess I'm not being clear. if we budgeted $20,000 for spay and neuter,
Right.
and all of a sudden we're going to extend this, I assume that we don't need to budget any more money,
Right.
then we're under budget, I guess, on spade and neuter so that we can extend this contract for more?
Yes, I believe
that-
so. Yeah, I believe so. I believe we are. I think we met with,
Okay.
young lady today, a representative from the, for our spay and neuter contract, and I think we are a little bit under budget.
Okay.
Perhaps we should have Mr. Francisco come up.
I'm Anthony Francisco, the finance director, and mechanically speaking, what happened is just the salary savings that are being built up
From
from
the
the
vet?
vacancy of the veterinary position has been transferred to the account for this contract. So it's kind of a net neutral to the budget.
Perfect, makes sense. Okay, I've got some more questions on the budget. Anthony, while you're up there. This may be a Judd deal, but on 27, when we're talking about the Westwood, operating the Westwood Golf Course Restaurant, is that, what's just a temporary fix? Is the plan for the city to take it over? Or are we going to look for somebody else to replace it?
Judd Foster, Director of Parks and Recreation. So no, this is a permanent fix, and we ended up taking the operation over in mid-budget. And so since there's no budget for us to operate it, this sets the budget in place. So we have a programmed or a projected revenue and expenditure budget both as part of this item. And so this sets that budget in place for us to buy supplies and materials and things to operate, and salary money to operate the facility.
So this being kind of mid-year, are you anticipating $200,000 in next year's budget of an increase to operate the restaurant now? Since it wasn't, I know there's some
This-
supplies and one-time deals.
This is
but-
this is the annual, or I need to check that. I think this is the annual number. Yes.
But we're only going for about
I
6 months.
understand. So that's why I need to
Okay.
check that number.
But you do anticipate in next year's budget to have a new item in there?
Yes.
for
We
the rest
will
of- 'cause we didn't have last
rebudget.
year's budget type thing.
We'll rebudget for the whole year.
Okay. And then my last comment is more for Anthony, is on 29. I guess I just want to say kudos. Basically, we're putting $350,000 to get our fund balance to the targeted fund balance. And could you talk a little bit about how we're already at the minimum and the 8-9%, if you could?
Yes, sir.
The audit.
Earlier in this fiscal year, the council directed a change to our reserve policies. The ordinance was changed such that the minimum in the rainy day fund, if you will, the net revenue stabilization fund, was changed from 3% to 4%. We have enough available funds in the rainy day fund already to meet that 4% minimum. But the targeted fund balance in the rainy day fund was also increased from 4.5 to 5%. So this appropriation would bring us to the targeted level, the new targeted level in the rainy day fund.
And we're able to do this because last year, I'm taking out the one-time transfer from the TIF. We were about $1.6 million surplus.
Yes, sir.
So this is
We
really
started
big.
this fiscal year in the general fund a little bit better off than we had projected.
And we normally do this kind of mid-year adjustments once we kind of get the audited numbers and we know what we've got. And
That's
so
absolutely
we're not
correct.
taking anything away from the current budget.
That's correct.
Thank you.
With your previous question, I would point out that there are some one-time expenditures in this $103,000 for Westwood. They're purchasing refrigeration
Excellent.
equipment and that sort of thing that's included in that appropriation.
Understood. Thank you.
Councilmember Bierman.
So I do think that Chief Humphrey might have answered my question, but my question about items 20 and 21 were about the timeline for a permanent veterinarian. So if you could just, I know you kind of touched on that in Councilmember Castleberry's question, but if you could just expand on that just a little bit.
The timeline?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. So we made an offer to a young lady that's in California. We're very excited about her. She also had an offer in Tulsa. And so we were able to offer her a job. She has relatives here close by. She's very excited. She has focused on shelter care and she will start April the 1st. She has small children, and so in order to make that transition from California and keep her kids in school until the end of the year, she asked that she could start on April the 1st. And so we've agreed, and we're really excited about. She actually came in, went through the process, the hiring process, and actually took a couple of days to actually tour the facility and ask a lot of questions. So we're excited.
Great. Well, I'm really excited to get a permanent veterinarian back on staff. I know that this has been difficult for Norman Animal Welfare staff to make sure that animals are vetted and spayed and neutered, because we cannot put them up for adoption until they are. So I know that that's created a little bit of a backlog, but I'm really excited that we seem to have found someone wonderful. And
Absolutely.
I do like the forethought of extending these contracts until June 30th. So we're not just throwing this new person into the ring and telling them to get to work. So I appreciate the foresight on that as well.
Yeah, we believe, she's very, very sharp, and we know that she can, we don't have any problem with her, acclimating herself, but we want to make sure she doesn't get so far behind or overwhelmed. So we're excited. Yeah.
Here. Motion on the floor is to approve the consent docket. Council members, you may cast your votes.
All votes have been to approve the consent docket. Passes unanimously.
So it's shown here.
Yes, right here. Right. Right by. You're looking, go to the right.
Go to the right. Oh, okay. Sean, would you like to come up and introduce our new coordinator? I think this is kind of exciting. And
thank you, Mayor and Council. Happy to, item 25 on your agenda is, you have to kind of read it carefully to understand what it's doing. Appreciate the approval. But it is a contract between the City of Norman and a company called Crossing the Chasm. But what this ultimately is the hiring of a full-time accessibility management consultant as opposed to a full-time staff member. He is here with us tonight. Jack McMahon is the owner and operator of Crossing the Chasm, and we are thrilled to have him on board by virtue of this contract approval tonight. He will start work with us again on a contractual basis on March 1st, and we hope that the 2020 budget then will extend that the funding for the contract for another 12 months. And this gives us a chance to transition into our new actually having staff to do accessibility management as opposed to just me, and an expert, truly someone who understands the field extremely well and has years of experience working with municipalities. So Jack is there in the back of the room with his wife, Susie, and we're glad that he was able to join us tonight.
good. We're glad you came. And we're glad you're joining us. Open here. This one. Oh. Yeah. Item 30 is an ordinance amending the 2015 International Building Code and 2015 International Existing Building Code to include requirements for installation of diaper changing tables. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
At this time, I'd like to recognize Jane Hudson, our interim director of planning. Presentation.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. So the ordinance before you tonight is addressing changes to the 2015 International Building Code as well as the 2015 International Existing Building Code. Back in, I believe it was, well, I guess to back up a little bit further, the council retreat, actually the discussion came up about requiring the installation of diaper changing tables within new commercial developments. Then at the September 27th Community Planning and Transportation Committee meeting, we, staff presented to the committee some options for requiring these changing tables. Then at the December 11th council conference, we came back and presented what you're seeing tonight, which would be the amendments to the existing building codes that we have right now. Historically, you know, as we all know, the diaper changing tables are installed in the women's restrooms and typically within the accessible stall. Currently, we do not have anything within the building codes that do require the installation of those changing tables. However, if someone does install the changing table, they do have to meet the ICC ANSI requirements for accessibility. Just a couple of the pictures here. You can see them in the handicap accessible stall, in the aisle there in the bathroom, and then also on a counter surface, which I will point out in that picture. It was pointed out to us that if you have it on that countertop, you do have to have a divider between the table and the sink, and that doesn't show that there, but that would be a possible option. So for the proposed building code amendments under the IBC for new construction, they would be required in these occupancy types you see here. So the assembly, restaurants, theaters, business in the office buildings over 10,000 square feet, the retail, so the mercantile areas, and then those institutional areas for I-1 and I-2, which would be the assisted living facilities and hospitals. There is an exemption for the occupancy type under educational, utility, factory areas that typically the public would not be going, and then also spaces that are restricted due to age, so like liquor stores and stuff. And then within the international existing building code, the required classification of work would be the change of occupancy. And then when at least 50% of the water closets are removed and or replaced, they would be looking at installing a table. And then when there's an addition that contains a restroom, they would be installing a table. And then within the existing building code, there is the exemption you'll see here when they have an existing diaper changing table available to male and female occupants. And then the diaper changing table is allowed to be installed in the handicap stall if it's technically infeasible for them to install it elsewhere, and that is defined within the code. And it looks back at how much it would cost a contractor, an applicant, owner, business owner to modify, which would deter him either doing the construction or being able to put the diaper changing table within the bathroom facilities there. So I have a couple pictures. This is the Norman Library there on Alameda. This is actually in the family restroom, so it looks like it's only in the accessible stall, but this is in their family restroom. And in Building C, we had a recent renovation. This is in the men's restroom, and then this is in the women's restroom that we did get those tables installed. Be happy to answer any questions that you have on this.
Council questions, Councilmember Bierman.
Jane, I want to thank you for your work on this. This was a policy priority of mine because if we are going to call our city family friendly and inclusive, then we need to have policies like this in place. And I am particularly happy about the language about being in the handicap stall. That was one thing that I heard quite a bit about, is that when these facilities are not available, this requires someone with a disability to have to take great pains to either go out to their vehicle or find another available location to change a child. But also, when the changing table is only located in the handicap stall, it creates a much higher probability of that handicap stall being used for a purpose other than to serve someone with a disability. So I really like how we've split this hair, and I'm happy for all of your work and thankful that it looks like we're going to be getting this done. Thanks.
Other questions from the council? Councilmember Castleberry.
I know we talked about this kind of in when we were doing a study session like this, and we talked about this was a value of the city and that kind of stuff. Was there any talk about giving instead of requiring it, encouraging it as far as giving a reduction in building fees or permit fees. And, I mean, I'm all for this. I think every business should do this. My reservation is requiring them to do it. Was there any talk about, we really want you to do it, we want to encourage you to do this, we'll knock $200 off your building fee or anything like that?
Well, I'm sure that there was discussion about encouraging it. I mean, we would like to see it, like, everyone has said, we'd like to see it installed. But one of the things, for example, if we have a small remodel, the building permit fees might be very low. I mean, $54 maybe might be a building permit fee. I don't deal with those daily, so I don't have those numbers, continually running through my head. But the $4 state fee we would have to pay, take in anyway. But, as a policy, I mean, we could, I guess, look at having a reduction if they're going to install that. I just don't know what it would be if the permit fee is $54 and then we would only be taking in $4.
What's the cost of these type of things?
Well, the information that I received, they can run between $150 and $300 just for the table itself. I'm sure you can get some, if you buy in bulk, you can get them for less. And then I talked to an architect, and what she got back from her individuals that she works with, contractors, it could be between $1,200 and $1,500 for the installation, for the contractor to install it. And also that's going to depend on how much reinforcement has to go behind the wall for support. So, I mean, it just depends on what they're working with when they get in there.
Are there any other cities in Oklahoma that have this, or are we going to be the first?
There's no one that I know of. We would be the first.
Thank you.
Comments from the public, questions?
Just a quick comment. Some of you know that I graduated.
Identify yourself, please.
My name is Mark Deaver. Some of you know me from owning Norman Computers. Some of you know me from the more interesting things I do for a living. Among other things, I graduated from OU with a degree in architecture about 20 years ago. And back then, all of the architects were already being encouraged to install changing tables at any new bathroom, because from a commercial standpoint, having changing tables in a public facility greatly increases desirability for that facility. So I'm not sure it's actually necessary to codify this because architects are already doing it. Most of what I do is in defense installations though, so I'm not certain about like shopping malls, but pretty much everybody, all of my classmates were already encouraged to be doing this. And to my knowledge, this isn't really an issue, at least not in larger buildings.
Thank you for your input. Final comments from the council? Councilmember Bierman.
I appreciate that feedback. And, what I will say is, as someone with a 13-month-old who has had to utilize these facilities quite a bit, actually be surprised how much fairly new construction has happened here in Norman that doesn't include changing tables, particularly in the men's room. And that's really kind of the crux of this, is that, my husband takes a very active role in our child's parenting, likes to take our daughter out to eat and to shop. And he has changed more diapers in the back of his car. And he's been very concerned about the temperature in the vehicle when he's been out for 2 hours and then has to go back and change diapers. So while it may be becoming a more frequent occurrence in the women's room, and with larger commercial structures, I will say I've never gone into a Target and not been able to find a changing table, or especially in a family restroom. But this is not as common in women's rooms, even, as I think some people would imagine, and particularly not in the men's room. So I do see the value in codifying this and not simply asking, but telling that this is a value that we need to be espousing if we're going to call ourselves a family-friendly and inclusive community.
The motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading by a show of hands. All those in favor? Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Thanks, Robert. That was 8 for and 1 against. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance. on
Motion to adopt. Well, I
Final
guess.
reading.
Second.
Motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on final reading. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have to adopt the ordinance upon final reading passes by a vote of 8 to 1. Voting against, Councilmember Castleberry.
So now that was item 31. Now we'll go to item 30 and we'll finish with item 32. So item 30 is an ordinance amending section 15109 of the city code to increase the monetary threshold in the definition of petty larceny from $500 to $1,000 to be consistent with state law. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on second reading section by section.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
At this time, I would like to recognize Christina Bell, Assistant City Attorney, to make the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council members. Christina Bell, Assistant City Attorney. This ordinance amends Section 15109 of the City Code, and what it does is change the monetary threshold of petty larceny in the definition portion. Currently, the definition is less than, or is an amount not exceeding $500. And this ordinance is amending that to increase that amount so that anything that is less than $1,000 would be considered petty larceny. The reason for the amendment is to make our ordinances consistent with state law. The Oklahoma Smart Criminal Justice Reform Act, which was passed by the Oklahoma voters, most commonly known as State Questions 780 and 781, in November of 2016, which went into effect in July of 2017, included an amendment that changed the definitions of petty larceny and grand larceny. At that time, the amount was, for petty larceny, was an amount of anything in excess of $500. And the state law increased that amount to $1,000, anything in excess of $1,000. Part of the reason for that, it was part of criminal justice reform and just a recognition that there had been a lot of time that had passed since those monetary thresholds had gone up, and with inflation and everything, the value of property has gone up significantly. And that does take into effect on the state level. Petty larceny is a misdemeanor, grand larceny is a felony. So that's part of the reason why the state law had changed at that time. Then just this last session, House Bill 2281, which went into effect on November 1st of 2018, just changed it from saying in excess of $1,000 to saying a value of $1,000 or greater. So what this ordinance does, it changes our definition to make it anything less than $1,000. So it basically doubles the amount that we can prosecute in municipal court. It's important to know that, our police department does have discretion when filing petty larceny charges. They can file that in municipal court or in district court. And the purpose of this amendment is just to make those monetary amounts consistent. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from the council? Councilmember Bierman.
Is this a requirement considering the state law changes? Is this necessary for us to do? To be in, on kind of on the same line as the state?
I don't know that it's necessary, because the way it is now, you could still file, because of the state law, officers could still file a misdemeanor in district court. If it was, let's say, with ours being 500, say it was $700, they could file that in district court. But I do think that the purpose of this amendment is consistent with the purpose of the criminal justice reform, which is to give, options at kind of a least restrictive means. A lot of times with criminal justice, you kind of look at starting at kind of a lower threshold first. And municipal court tends to be kind of, a first-time offense type of category. And I think that would make it more consistent. I will advise, just to let you all know, one of my roles is a prosecutor in our municipal court. And it's very rare that we receive, even now, citations that even come anywhere near that amount. you know, I have seen some for $300 or $400 theft at Walmart or Target, things like that. But the majority of the charges that I see are from those retailers, and they really are about $200 or less, most of them. So like I said, we are doing this to be consistent and to kind of comply with the spirit of the state questions, you know, which went to the state voters. But as a practical matter, I don't think it's going to increase a substantial amount of the charges that we receive.
Any other questions from council members? Questions or comments from the audience? Final question? Councilmember Bierman?
So I do just have one comment on this because I talked a lot with the Oklahoma Retail Merchants Association about this issue because this was the one aspect of 780 and 781 that they came out fairly strongly against. And I'm kind of two minds on it. I do believe in reducing penalties wherever we can, and this certainly accomplishes that. On the other hand, the reason why the Oklahoma Retail Merchants was so concerned about this is because of organized retail crime. And in other cities, in other states, when these limits have been raised like this, there has been an increase in organized retail crime, mostly at places like Home Depot, where you could pick up one thing and walk out with it, and it would be, you know, a $300, $400, $500, $800, $900 piece of equipment. So I'm not saying that I'm opposed to this. I just think that this is something that we need to be mindful of because there have been concerns about this in other states where they have adjusted you know, these limits and seen an increase in that kind of crime. I'm not necessarily going to say that that's going to happen here, but this was their one concern with 780 and 781, and it was one of the reasons why they reached out to me to express their concern about this, because I've worked with them on other issues and they knew that I was going to be here tonight. So I'm still going to vote in favor of this because I think that being aligned with state law in this way is not a bad thing, but this is something that I would like us to be mindful of.
The motion on the floor is to adopt the ordinance on second reading by a show of hands. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. That was unanimous. I'll entertain a motion to adopt or reject the ordinance on final reading.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion on the adopt the ordinance on final reading. Council members, you may cast your vote.
All votes have been cast, and the motion to adopt the ordinance upon final reading passes unanimously.
Item 32 is a resolution expressing the desire of council to enter into binding agreements by June 30th, 2019, providing for early termination of the University North Park Increment Finance District sales tax and ad valorem tax increment, directing the city manager to direct staff to negotiate with related development partners, NEDC, and other community partners to reach a mutually agreeable settlement of all outstanding matters related to the UNP TIF, and directing the city manager to prepare the fiscal year ending 2020 budget based on the goal of sales tax and ad valorem tax increments ending on June 30th, 2019.
Can I motion to postpone this?
You may make a motion
right
to
now,
postpone.
or do I have to wait till my turn to speak?
No, you can make a motion
Okay.
to postpone.
I'd like to make a motion to postpone this item until the March 12th meeting.
Do I have a second for the motion to postpone?
Second.
Was that a motion? Was that a second?
Yes.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to postpone this item to February 26th.
Nope. March 12th.
March 12th.
March 12th.
I'm sorry. Okay.
It would be after we have enough time. Because March or February 26th.
I'm sorry, I thought you were postponing it till the next meeting. Okay, the motion is to postpone until March 12th. Councilmember Wilson.
Never mind.
No comments? Councilmember Scott.
Okay, and I just want to explain why I'm asking for postponement here. I think I've explained to a few people in this room and a few people online. We had an executive session, obviously, and I just want to go ahead and I'll express, I want to end the TIF, obviously, like we all up here want to end the TIF. And I'll try to keep this short because I know that we have things to do after this, but we had an executive session and we discussed, potential litigation, and really what we discussed is how to avoid it. The thing is about this is we have ongoing negotiations. That's what our legal staff is doing. And that, in fact, Councilmember Hickman, and I don't want to speak too much, but what he asked was that we make the options presented to us available to the public to get feedback on. And so that was the direction that we were leading with. And so it came as a surprise when this ended up on our agenda this week. And as you guys know, many of you know, last summer when we were going to vote on the HVS study, I voted against the HVS study, and I made that very public because I don't believe in wasting money when we can save it. And the whole reason on ending the TIF is so that we can put money back into our general fund for operating, for what we need to do. A litigation, which we've already spent, I don't know, I want to say over $500,000 on lawsuits in this fiscal year. Between getting rid of our city manager and our city attorney. And I think, separation agreements with them. And I don't want to waste any more money on litigations. I want to make sure that we're being responsible and we are following a process. And this wasn't part of the process. So we do have ongoing negotiations that we are looking at. And I want us to, like we keep talking about, build an inclusive community with our partners, whether depending on how we feel about each other or how we don't feel about each other. We need to be having the hard conversations and not just throwing things out at each other. So I just don't want to waste money. I don't want to have any potential risk for doing this without thinking about it. Does that make sense?
Councilmember Bierman.
Catherine, can you talk a little bit about how we came to this point and the conversations that we've had on this resolution with the developers for UTC?
Sure. This resolution came forward as a rule of 3, really 4 requests, as the memo states. In talking with Councilmember Hickman, I developed the first draft of the resolution and sent it to the requesters to review. And then he suggested that we send that on to the developer representatives to see if it caused them any heartburn. They did come back with some comments and suggestions, and almost all of those were included in the resolution that's before you tonight. I think the only big change from what they suggested was the very last clause in the resolution regarding the budget preparations. So they have seen this and they have had input on this. One of the things we're working on with those representatives is an MOU that sets out the structure for how we end the TIF in a cooperative fashion, what agreements need to be changed, what obligations will be impacted. And so that is something that we're still working on, and we will be coming forward to you all with in the next meeting or two.
So in other words, this did not come as a surprise to the developers. They're not just hearing about this for the first time tonight or on the agenda, that we've been in discussions with them about it, that they were able to give feedback on the resolution, and it looks like most of the comments that they suggested have been incorporated in this, and that negotiations are ongoing, that this hasn't stalled them at all. This is not triggering them to go to the courthouse tomorrow, that they are aware that what this does is set priorities for staff and tell staff that this is the budget we're going to be looking at preparing with the money from the TIF. Not a surprise to them, not a gotcha moment.
Right. I did send it to them on Friday and they were able to provide input.
Councilmember Wilson.
Thank you. I do not support postponing this resolution. It is a resolution of intent. I think it is prudent for us to tell the public what our intent is, to direct staff of how we intend as a council to use funds, and to have conversations with the developer above board and in meetings where everybody can hear what we're talking about. Now, there are things that we have to talk about in executive session, and I do believe I was, and maybe others, requested that we get as much information out of that executive session as we could out into the public. I know that when you go buy a new car, you don't say, I love that car, but can I have it for much cheaper? You know, you have to, there's a spirit to negotiation that has to happen. So what I am happy to put my name on this resolution for is to speak publicly as to what our intention is, to not be coy about it, to do the very best we can to get as much information to the public and to staff and to the other council members of what we want to do. And I fully support ending the TIF. I have all along. It's been a very difficult, litigious process to get through. And I will not, I'm sorry, support the postponing of this item.
Councilmember Hickman.
I also don't support postponing this. I guess the question I would have is what's going to be different on March 12th than tonight? I'm not sure if there's an answer to that question. Catherine, I'm just curious, have you heard when you were talking to the developers, did they indicate if, you know, based on their feedback and their edits to the resolution, if they were going to be filing a lawsuit if we approve this?
No, I don't believe they will. I think they're focused on the MOU that I discussed earlier and getting that done and before this body.
I mean, the resolution simply sets a deadline. You know, I'm a lawyer, and lawyers are more motivated when they have a deadline to get something done by. So it sets a deadline of June 30th to try to get this done. It provides transparency so that the public knows that we're directing staff to work on this and to negotiate, because that's not been anything this council has done officially as a body. And it directs staff to prepare the budget, which we start in 2 weeks, if I understand correctly, the budget calendar. The first budget discussions begin in 2 weeks, so that staff knows that we want them to prepare the budget based on the TIF being ended and the increment being done and the money going back into the city's budgets. And so without this resolution tonight, I don't know if our staff's going to prepare a budget with the TIF funds returned or not, or if they're going to prepare 2 budgets. I don't know if staff maybe has direction from council from behind the scenes to work on ending the TIF. But we all know how that went down with the whole arena discussion last year. It ended up costing us $300,000 in legal fees with outside attorneys, because there was no clear resolution from council on should we or should we not proceed with the arena, and hope we can learn from that process and decide up front at the beginning now that we want to provide guidance. And so if everybody supports ending the TIF, then I'm not sure why we just don't vote on this resolution tonight.
Yeah, I heard you. I think just a minute. I think the reason for postponing it is there is no reason why this shouldn't go through the council process. There is no emergency. We have 2 more meetings coming. We have the executive session next week to talk about this, and then we have the MOU with these partners to talk about the following week. Why don't we get that information and then we do a resolution? I don't understand why it had to be put on tonight. I don't understand why we couldn't take it through the process of a study session and let everybody be part of this. So, Councilmember Castleberry.
A couple of concerns. I am going to support postponing on this. On a couple of reasons. One is more principle than anything else. I have used the rule of 3 myself. I'm not opposed to the rule of 3 when used properly. The rule of 3 is to be used when you can't get something on the agenda. It's an appeals process by 3 council members who we put an item to a conference or to study session, and there wasn't enough support in the study session or the committee to move it forward. But 3 council members felt they still want to have a hearing on it. And because maybe not all the council members are at the study session or not at the committee meeting, and they just didn't want to die in committee. And so the rule of 3 was to give them some recourse when you go through that process. I'm a process person. And I think we need to stick to the process. Or you ask the city manager to put something on the agenda and he or she says, no, I don't think there's enough support by council to do it. And for whatever reason, they don't do it. But you still want 3 or more council members who want to do it. We're not following that process here. And so by postponing it, we will follow the process because we'll have another executive session next Tuesday. And we're going to talk about this a little more. I'm very concerned that 2 council members basically just said, disclosed information that happened in executive session last week. I'm very concerned about that.
Councilmember Carter.
I'm not done.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Dramatic pause. With the resolution itself, well, I'll make my comments about the resolution itself if we don't postpone it. But I do not necessarily agree with the city attorney's opinion that we won't get sued. I think that last clause, I think our risk of getting sued, and this is not from executive session, this is from talking to the attorneys involved with the UNP. Their concern is whenever the money that they think is theirs, and that's what we're trying to get a mutually agreeable resolution, is not going to be available to fulfill the development agreement. And when we take any type of action that encumbers those funds, or we tell city staff to budget as if we're going to get that money, that would give them cause to go to the judge and say, I need a temporary restraining order here. I could be damaged. And then that money will be tied up for at least a year, if not longer, and we will not get that money in our budget. I think it's irresponsible for us to budget on something we don't have. Do we need to do a resolution telling city staff to prepare the budget, assuming the utility rate, the water rate's going to pass? Or, I'm sorry, the stormwater is going to pass? No. We don't budget on things until we know about them. And telling the city manager to prepare a budget based on unknowns is not prudent. We didn't do that last year when the Wayfair case came down and we knew we were going to get more use tax. And that was in June. That was prior to our budget. And you don't budget on things you don't know. We do make assumptions on growth rates, on what our sales taxes could be. But we've got a pretty good foundation of what that's going to be. And if we do this, then I would ask, well, we're talking about the motion postponed, so I'll stick to that for right now.
Councilmember Carter.
There was one instance last week that really galvanized for me the importance of moving forward with this right now. And it was in the training session, I'll call it, that Annalise did for members of the staff and council in regard to the stormwater bond, the stormwater utility, and the transportation bond. And what she said in that meeting was that on February 13th, tomorrow, after this election, we are all in on trying to educate the public about those 3 very vitally important initiatives for this city. Now, the first thing that the public is going to say as we begin that process in my ward and the people that I interact with on a frequent basis is, well, the first one was the senior center. What about the senior center? We've answered that question. We've checked that box. The second box is ending the TIF. So tonight sends a clear signal that we intend on ending this TIF in a 4-month period, which is a adequate length of time for all the parties to negotiate a reasonable, good faith exit from this tax increment project. And so there is no difference between now or the 13th of March. And I'm very disappointed in hearing that we're trying to postpone that tonight. There certainly have been members of this council that have, and there's no doubt that they want to continue to have this TIF in place, even though on key votes, they vote in favor of sending a signal or entering into an agreement to end the TIF.
there are cross intentions. There's a clear mixed signals coming from them. This is just another example of that. There's no reason not to move forward this resolution tonight. We can vote on it. If it fails, then people that are for the TIF have been able to express themselves, and people that are against the TIF are able to express themselves as well. We begin this budget process in 2 weeks, and I feel like that Ms. Walker's had in-depth discussions with the attorneys that are representing UPC and UTC. They are acting in good faith, and we are acting in good faith. The signals that we have received, are signals that this process, those that support this want to extend it as long as possible. We need to set a finite end to this, so that we're able to move our city past it. It's a very divisive issue, and it's not healthy for us as a community. It's been a divisive, ugly issue for over the past decade. It's a chapter that we need to close. I am not in favor of postponing this. We need to vote on it tonight. We need to be able to give our staff clear direction on the intent of council. And if there's ambiguity up here amongst the council, if it's a split vote and we may not end the TIF, then they have that as their directive to move forward with. They can prepare budgets based on what the anticipated outcome might be. So it's very disappointing to hear this right now. From the beginning, I've been opposed to the TIF for many, many reasons. And it's my belief that it's the overwhelming support of this community to end the TIF. We need to move to vote for this tonight. We need to be able to start tomorrow to move forward with these two important bond issues and this important utility, and like we put the senior center behind us, let's put the TIF behind us and move forward tonight.
Councilmember Clark.
I agree that a date certain is helpful, and I'm sure staff always appreciates guidance, but we are putting the cart before the horse on this when we know there are negotiations. I think we need to let staff do their job, and we'll have more information to make a better resolution, and one that might include everybody. There's been so much talk of collaboration and teamwork the past few months, and then the rule of 3 comes out. That doesn't follow the process. I just don't understand that. One minute I feel like we're moving in the direction of teamwork, and the next minute, another rule of 3. So I'm all for postponing it. I support a resolution. Again, I think it's in the spirit of providing a deadline and our intentions and transparency and support of the stormwater. But we have things that are pending. Can we please let the process work, let staff do their job, and work as a team for once on a big issue that is dividing our community?
Councilmember Wilson.
How long has staff had this request from us for, Catherine?
I don't recall the original date. It was somewhere in mid-January, I think. Maybe early January. January 15th.
Okay, so in that time, staff knew, the mayor knew that we had intentions of getting this on the agenda. There was plenty of time for everybody else on council to know. And nobody here said that we needed to keep it a secret or anything like that. And we worked with staff and we worked with the mayor to make sure that we didn't inhibit any processes that were happening that we weren't sure about. We asked questions. We asked for staff to make sure we didn't have any unintended consequences. We did all of the things to make sure our fellow council members were protected in this. And what I want to see is who wants to end the TIF.
So we've all indicated that.
Yeah, but you're not.
And we've indicated to the staff. And if this has been in the office since the 22nd, why didn't somebody just ask to put it on a study session? Why was it? And this isn't the same thing that was originally brought to the office on the 22nd.
Because
and
we
there
worked with
was
you
a
guys.
and there was a request not to share the information when that one was brought in. So this is just the same kind of thing. There's no reason, none, that there was not a request to the city manager or me to make this part of the process. And we are working on it right now. The staff has been working on it since November. Councilmember Scott, I don't think, yes. And then Councilmember
I just want
Carter.
to clarify, it came as a surprise to me because of the conversation that we had last week. So I didn't know that there was a request to do this, put this on an agenda. That's why I guess it was a rule of 3 or 4, you know. And I respect, you know, a voting block and consensus and things of that nature. I just want to make sure that we are not getting ourselves into a potential bind. Again, my main concern is our budget and not spending excess money. And I just want to make it clear. I wasn't asking if we were surprising developers. I really don't care. Like, the more surprises, the better. But when it comes to us working together, it was a surprise. So I also don't have like any kind of conversations with lawyers from any group. I just kind of do my own thing based off of what's presented in front of me when it comes to me, and I'm doing my best. So moving forward. Ready? Let's go.
Councilmember Carter.
Again, I want to say that it's vitally important to stormwater transportation and the stormwater utility that we give clear and decisive message, send a clear and decisive message to the public that we're ending the TIF. And if we fail to do that tonight, and we begin our campaign to promote those issues tomorrow, or educate about those issues tomorrow, and those issues fail, I will look back at this night as one of the reasons that has occurred.
Councilmember Holman.
So to me, this was a surprise. I wish I'd have known about it. I wish it would have been put on a study session agenda last week or this week. What we're dealing with right here is exactly why I do not like the rule of 3, because this is what it gets used for all the time. Instead of following the process, it just throws something on an agenda and excludes the rest of the council from being a part of the discussion about it. And I really don't appreciate being treated that way by my colleagues. I don't like that rule. It always leads to division up here. That's all it ever does. I support the resolution. I support ending the TIF by June 30th. I want to know, we've got an executive session coming up next week, and we have city staff in ongoing negotiations. I want to end this thing, and I want to end it in a way that doesn't get the city in further legal trouble. And based on my recollection of our executive session, I think doing this resolution at our next meeting or the one after would be more appropriate. Thank you.
Councilmember Bierman.
So unfortunately, we'd have to wait until the second, we wouldn't be able to pass this resolution next week. We'd have to wait until the 26th. But my concern really follows what Councilmember Carter said, is that we're trying to roll out a Vision for Norman package and asking voters to vote to take money out of their own pockets for, yes, much needed projects. But if we start that process while saying, well, trust us because we're talking in executive session about ending the TIF, that's not public. We understand what's happening, and we know that we're taking steps to make these moves, but the public doesn't, because we can't tell them. And all they see is executive session after executive session with threat of litigation, and they're not buying it. And that's what I see. And that's what I see when I talk to people about stormwater and about the transportation bond, is they say, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but when are you guys going to end the TIF? And so putting this resolution out there does not increase the threat of a lawsuit. I do trust our city legal staff on this and the fact that they took the pains to talk to the developers and get their feedback and their buy-in in this resolution by amending it. But what it does is it sets clear expectations. It allows us to go into negotiations with an end date in mind, which is important because it helps eliminate foot dragging, and it prevents us from falling into the same issue that we fell into with the arena last year, which was we got all of these council members saying, well, I'm not sure that I support this, or I'm not sure I support that. But there was no consensus given to staff to say we need to stop this now. And that's why we ended up spending more money on outside legal counsel. So I don't support postponing this. I do support this resolution because I want to kick off Vision for Norman tomorrow with a clear guideline for that set of projects and a clear timeline on how we're going to be addressing the TIF.
Councilmember Castleberry.
I think everybody has spoken, so I'm going to go ahead and call the question.
The question's been called. The motion on the floor. Not if the question's been called. The question has been called. All those in favor of the question? Calling the question? Yeah, that's what we're voting on, calling the question. All right. I think we already did. Okay. Go ahead and vote on your board. This is on calling the question. That ends the discussion and we vote.
I want to make sure everybody understands what they're voting on. A yes vote means you want to call the question and vote on postponement. A no vote means you do not want to call the question and you want to continue discussion. Does everybody understand that?
Okay, we will continue the discussion. Are there comments from the audience?
Yeah. All votes have been cast and the motion to call the question fails by a vote of 6-3. Voting in favor, Mayor Miller, Councilmember Hickman, Councilmember Castleberry.
That's why I repeated. Everybody.
Steve Ellis, 633 Reed Avenue. The public comment that I wanted to make about the postponement is that I think many of the comments that are being made from the dais tonight reflect the position that you are all in because you've been privy to the executive sessions, whereas it's still just very confusing to the people in the room and I think to the people who are at home watching on television. And in particular, I think the conclusion or the confusion stems from a couple of claims. I mean, first of all, it seems as though we're doing a lot of things right now, and it seems that we voted to do those things on November 13th, 2018. So we had a resolution that was actually a lot like this one that expressed the spirit of the council that they wanted to end the TIF. If I remember correctly, it ended up being unanimous as amended. So we've been down this road before. In that resolution, there was direction to the council or direction to the staff to prepare a budget that included some payoff to the Norman Public Schools for the school resource officers. There was an attempt to pull together the statutory review committee, which is about as firm a signal as you can give to your partners that something is going down. But then nobody said anything about that, what happened with that resolution. In particular, the statutory review committee never met and nobody explained what the heck was going on. So I think there's one partial misunderstanding is like, holy cow, didn't we do this already? The other misunderstanding, though, is from the other perspective, which is the idea that this resolution is going to convince anybody that the TIF is actually dead is, I think, just a complete misunderstanding. What this looks like is a second attempt to do something that we failed to do in November with a similar resolution. So, I mean, I take it that people who vote no on the resolution itself might be perceived as being pro-TIF, but I certainly don't think that anybody who's paying attention to the TIF issue in Norman would take that this resolution passing tonight or in the future without any further information would be evidence that the TIF is dead and gone. This just looks like it's more kicking the can down the road. So, I mean, what I want to say vis-a-vis the postponement is, without more knowledge, doing it tonight isn't going to send the signal that the people who want to do it tonight think that they're sending. That's my sense of the matter. But, you know, that's going to be true in 2 weeks as well, unless there's more information that comes out. Thank you.
Hopefully we'll have more information. Final comments? Councilmember Carter.
Yeah, the problem, Mayor, is that we did, as Mr. Ellis said, ask the Statutory Review Committee to come with a proposal within 30 days, and nothing became of that. We have been kicking this can down the road, continually kicking this can down the road. A vote to postpone this is nothing but a delay tactic to keep the TIF alive. It is a pro-TIF vote. And to vote against this resolution is a pro-TIF vote. And the people deserve some kind of finality to this fiasco. And Stephen, we tried like heck to get this on the agenda. It just won't get on the agenda. Okay. So that's when we have to do things like this.
That is just absolutely not true.
Okay. I beg to differ.
Councilmember Hickman.
In early December, I sent an email to the city manager. I'm not sure who all I copied because I can't find the exact email, saying, sorry for the short notice, but we only obtained information today pertinent to this request. We respectfully request to add to the agenda for Tuesday, December 11, 2018, a resolution directing staff to prepare the appropriate ordinance or other legal documents to rescind and repeal the original ordinance for TIF number 2. In early December, a request was made for a resolution similar to the one that's being voted on tonight to move forward with the termination of the ordinance for TIF number 2. The email is longer than what I just read to you, but that's the gist of it. I received an email from the mayor shortly after that saying she just read my emails and had things to tell me about with regard to meetings with the lawyers and people representing the county and others. And then subsequently, there were follow-on meetings, and that resolution, while we did not push for it aggressively to put it on through a rule of 3, that request was made and was never honored. Subsequently, in mid-January, a more formal request was made by the rule of 3, a rule of 4 procedure. So to say that there wasn't a prior request in early December is just not actually factually accurate. There were things that happened in the interim period of time in between, such as meetings with representatives of our statutory partners who did not want to have the meetings, the formal meetings that had been previously requested in a resolution in November because of the fear of litigation. So I just want to set the record straight. I'm sure that email is a matter of open records. If somebody wanted to request it, I couldn't find it specifically on my phone, but I found a screenshot of it, a photo of it that I had taken. So there had been prior requests, and you know, council can choose to delay this, but I just want to make it clear that there was a previous request,
which you agreed to not follow through on.
I don't recall ever having that specific conversation, other than to say that we were going to have some discussions with those partners and see where they were going, what they were going to do. And then subsequently, we wanted to go forward with making it clear that we were ending the TIF, which is what we're trying to accomplish tonight.
Councilmember Scott.
Okay, I just want to be very clear. I want to end the TIF. In fact, I want to end all TIFs at this point. I'm tired of having the TIF conversation. This is my nightmare. And also, a vote for postponement is not a pro-TIF vote, is a pro-process vote. That's all I got.
Councilmember Castleberry.
I guess a couple questions. I would like to ask Councilman Carter, you said that you did follow the process to get on here. I'd be curious what process you followed to get on. I don't know. I didn't know about this email till he just missed. So maybe that's what you're talking about. Because my other question would be to the manager, if this was requested, why wasn't we going through there? I mean, it's my understanding that I think people need to understand, just because a council member sends the manager an email to do something doesn't mean the manager does it. I mean, we all request things. That's not the process. That's not one of us wants to do something, or two of us want to do something, or three of us want to do something, unless we do the full formal rule of three. That's not the way things go. There's no organization that way. You can't, we have staff, we have a council retreat in the summer. We set our guidelines, we set things we're going to do, and that's what staff works on. That's their work plan, that's their plan of action. Now things pop up. You know, we can't control when things hit the agenda. Somebody wants to bring something forward from a development process, or those things happen. But we have overall things we're working on. And so I guess I heard rumblings of this, but certainly never saw an email, never saw this resolution until Friday at 4:30 or 5 o'clock whenever it was put on there. So I don't understand the comments of we did follow the process, because I don't feel like the rest of us who aren't part of this Rule 4 knew about it. So it's very clear in December or November, we all voted to end the TIF. I cannot believe there is any ambiguity whatsoever in anybody's mind that we don't want to end the TIF. Stop throwing us out there that we don't, if you don't vote for this, then you're pro-TIF. I will say this, though. I want to responsibly end the TIF. And as a trustee of the city, taking a chance to get sued and tie up $9 million or more money because we can't wait 2 weeks to do something while we're already in the process of doing it is irresponsible. So I still favor the motion to postpone so that we can do it responsibly. Nobody's saying, hey, why don't we just do a motion here to extend the TIF for another 10 years? There's no talk of that whatsoever. We've never said, nobody up here has ever said that. So let's stop the shenanigans, okay? And let's just go follow the process and do it responsibly, get this done.
I agree with all the conversation about the process. That's what we should be doing. We wouldn't end up in these kinds of conversations. The motion on the floor is to adopt the, the motion on the floor is to postpone the resolution to March 12th. Council members, you may cast your vote.
Yes. All votes have been cast. Postpone passes by a vote of 5-4. Voting against, Councilmember Wilson, Councilmember Hickman, Councilmember Carter, Councilmember Veerman. The postponement moves to March the 12th.
This brings us to miscellaneous discussion. This is an opportunity for citizens to address the City Council. Remarks should be directed to the council as a whole and limited to 5 minutes or less.
Hello, my name is Mark Deaver, and some of you know me because I own the Norman Computer Store. And just a brief trigger warning, the topic I'm going to talk about tonight can be viewed by some as being rather indecent and offensive. So I'm going to be as delicate as I can. So for about the last say 20 years, we have seen probably hundreds of parents come into my office asking about how can they protect their children from certain things on the internet. And, and over the years, we've advised them in a number of ways. Various blocking programs don't typically work. It really just takes active supervision if you want to be safe. Over the last year or so, we've had probably about 50 or so parents coming into my office, talking with my staff about problems involving their kids and the school laptops. Now, the internet is an amazing place. The sum of all human knowledge exists on the internet. But the rest of the internet has maybe some other things that you may not want your children looking at. And I want to discuss with the City Council some of the issues that various parents have encountered involving their kids being able to look up certain other things on the internet using these school laptops that are supposedly locked down. This was brought to my attention the other day that a parent asked my staff member to show her how her kid was able to look up certain things. My staff member made a very simple video showing this is how anybody with a basic middle school knowledge of computers could access certain other things on the internet by manipulating search engines and various things that most 10, 11, 12-year-olds know how to do these days. While I do have a very interesting video that would be fantastic viewing on the big screen, I don't think it'd be appropriate to show that video at this time, but I would like to invite the City Council members to either meet with me privately, and I can have my web developer, Amy, email you a link to the video we made. It is very enlightening and should not be viewed if you are of a faint stomach or with children around. But this is a problem that we've encountered over the years with parents, and we've had enough requests to deal with this, to help deal with this. One of the other things that we've encountered is a lot of times these school computers, while they're locked down, the kids have their own private accounts, and the parents have no administrative authority over the children. What that means is that the children could be looking up whatever they want to on their computers. The parents have no way of knowing, and they have no oversight. And because these computers are given to the children by the school, the parents have no means to really do anything about it, because the kids have to use the computers for turning in homework and assignments and whatnot. This kind of other material was an issue at my school before the internet, where we passed stuff around with floppy disks, and now that the internet is a thing, there's all kinds of interesting things that can be done. And it's not even just certain other types of indecent material that you have to worry about. There's a lot of threat from social media. There have been numerous reports that have come out that the various heads of social media companies don't let their kids on social media because these social media applications were designed to be addictive, cyberbullying, all that kind of stuff. Isn't it interesting that the increase in mass school violence is directly correlated with the rise of social media and the internet? And I could give you various FBI studies and things pertaining to some of the more interesting projects that I work on. But anyway, I don't know exactly what the proper format is to address this. Like I said, while I think there needs to be a public discussion about this, I don't know if it would be appropriate for me to go into specific detail at this time on how these kids are able to do what they do. But there does need to be something done about it. And so my question is, what is the best format for us to discuss this in a setting where okay.
For you to do would be to give the city clerk your card so that we could contact you.
Okay, after the city council meeting, I'd be happy to get everybody's information, and we'll email a link to the video that.
We could distribute that if you give that information.
All right, very, very good, very good.
So, and I would highly recommend that you talk with the school board officials. I would go to the superintendent and he would direct you to whoever is over that area and
We
visit
intend
with
to.
them.
Yeah, we
Think you've done
intend to.
that?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'm going to read from my prepared statement. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Shane Dodson, and I'm a citizen of Norman, Oklahoma. I'm also a husband, father, and co-manager of a small business in this community. Above all of that, I'm a Christian, and it's because I hold to the Bible as the inspired and inerrant word of God that I recognize and submit to your authority as our local civil magistrates. I do this because God's word instructs me to. Romans 13:1 says, "Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God." God explains to us in his word that he himself ordained civil leadership and also the purpose for which he did so. Again, from Romans 13, verse 4 reads, "For he being the civil magistrates, is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil." So plainly we see that you are, whether you realize it or not, or whether you agree with it or not, you are God's minister to, you are God's minister to execute judgment on evil and reward what is good. Then when you look at Psalm 2, it starts to come together. God is addressing kings and those in civil authority when he commands them, all of you, to give honor and to submit to the Son of God, Jesus Christ. So I'm here to call any of you who haven't yet repented and trusted in Jesus Christ and in him alone for your salvation to do so. I encourage you to consider the perfect law of God and how you have, as we all have, fallen way short of keeping it. I encourage you to consider that Jesus Christ came to this earth to die for sinners, to pay the sin debt in his life's blood. I'm here to proclaim that this crucified and formerly dead Jesus has risen again and lives today at the right hand of God the Father, where he rules and reigns as sovereign King and Lord. So I'm here to plead with you to humble yourselves as individuals and as civil magistrates, to place your faith in Christ and submit to his law word. Right now, a senator in the Oklahoma State Capitol is trying to fulfill his duty to rule according to the law of God. Joseph Silk is trying to get SB 113 passed, which would provide legal protection to all human life after fertilization and effectively criminalize all abortion in the state of Oklahoma. But many object by calling abortion a right. But abortion isn't a right. It is the murder of preborn children by their parents and a paid assassin called a medical professional. Whether it's abortifacients commonly sold at drug stores and given away at Planned Parenthood, whether it's chemical abortions that burn children alive in the womb, or surgical abortions that use instruments to take children apart piece by piece, tens of millions of babies have been killed in the name of choice. But you can do something, ladies and gentlemen. It reads in Isaiah 10:1, "Woe to those who decree unrighteous decrees." Make no mistake, legalized abortion is an unrighteous decree. Although abortion is a sin that can be forgiven in Christ, God will judge not only those who unrepentantly murder their own children, but he also pronounces a woe on those who legislatively sign off on it. As local magistrates, you have an opportunity to stand up and defy the Supreme Court as it pertains to Roe v. Wade, to treat it not as law, but as a court opinion that's been used to justify the murder of the preborn. After all, it isn't unheard of for state and local magistrates to ignore federal rulings. Just ask Colorado and their magistrates when it comes to federal drug laws. Just ask Texas, where local magistrates have declared some of their cities as sanctuary cities in protest to President Trump's immigration laws. So the idea of ignoring Roe v. Wade isn't nearly as radical or unheard of as some might initially think. So you can intervene. Like Senator Silk right now, you can ignore Roe v. Wade. You can embrace the legal protection of human life, all human life, black, white, male, female, rich, poor, old, and young. You can declare Norman, Oklahoma to be a sanctuary city for preborn children. If you take a stand against an unrighteous federal decree, you will find you have many followers of Jesus Christ right here in Norman who will stand with you and support you as you do so. So I urge you, as one who respects your position and who cares for you as an image bearer of God, please obey our Lord, as he says here in Psalm 2. "Now therefore be wise, O kings, be instructed, you judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and you perish in the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are all those who put their trust in him. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay, members of Norman City Council, I commend you for your time and effort that goes into these meetings. We were here January 22nd, and we left at midnight, so the marathon meeting. So anyway, I'm Tammy Dodson, Shane Dodson's wife, mother of 4 living children, 2 who died before birth. And the reason why I mention that, my children are pertinent to the plea that I know the grief and anguish of losing a baby in miscarriage, as some of you know, or you may know someone who's gone through a miscarriage. In abortion, the mom has made the choice to take her baby's life, heaping sin upon sorrow. Legalizing the killing of your own baby makes the mom think it's normal, and they bypass and deny the grief brought on by their actions. We have millions suffering this way, and we have millions who've never seen the light of day, thereby killing the growth of our own nation. We are our own worst enemies in this regard. As I approached leaders at the Oklahoma State Capitol about this, they said we need to take care of the ones that are born. My answer to that is we must protect them to get them born. Proverbs 29:2 says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when a wicked man rules, the people groan. As the verse states, those in authority who are righteous will reflect God's ways, and people will rejoice. Those in authority are wicked and will not rule according to his ways. The people will groan. I'm not here to determine whether you're one or the other. I'm here to proclaim to you that there is a groaning in Norman, a groaning against the atrocity of the murder of innocent babies in our city. There may be some or all of you on the council who would like to see Norman as an abortion-free or sanctuary city. I'm here with my husband to let you know that if you use the authority you've been given as a council to make abortion legal in Norman, there will be an unprecedented rejoicing in our great city. I can name multiple churches and various organizations, including our church, Christ the King, that are filled with families who are ready and willing to adopt or support expecting moms who choose to give life rather than kill their babies. Joel 2:12-14 says, now therefore, says the Lord, turn to me with all your heart, with fasting, weeping, with mourning. Rend your hearts and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and of great kindness, and he relents from doing harm. Who knows if he will turn and relent and leave a blessing behind him? Proverbs 14:34 says, righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach to any people. So please soberly consider your position and move towards saving babies' lives so that this blot and reproach in our city would be removed. Thank you, and God bless you.
Roger Gallagher, 2513 Woodsong. When you are dealing with these scooters, I've learned through the information by talking to some of the people in law enforcement that I guess your decisions have not been completed on how to adjust and how to control or suggest that these scooters be operated, because the police are forbidden from writing tickets on these scooters. Now, if you have something similar, like a bicycle, they can write tickets on a bicycle. I guess you're caught between the idea of a motorized unit on the scooter where a bicycle is propelled and the scooter is motorized, but it's not motorized like a motorcycle. But I think you've seen some of the same things I have. You've seen some of these kids, probably under the age of 17 or 18, and they're running around these things. They go from sidewalks to roadway. They cross when the light is red. I've seen that twice this week. and they have very little consideration for the traffic laws, evidently thinking, since there are no restrictions that suggest they obey the law, no restrictions like a bicycle, since the police cannot write a ticket, since the city has found that they do not want to let the police write tickets for these scooters. It seems to me like you're putting yourself in a pretty big liable situation, especially when you have a lot of these people riding scooters, just creating problems around parking lots and zipping in and out of traffic when they want to. Now, I'm not making anything that you probably have not experienced yourself, but I'd like to at least somehow see a recommendation from the city where it comes down that you're dealing with these, especially in the time of day to 10 o'clock at night, and you have the scooters for the birds with no lights. Now, how did you let that slide by? You have the time period up to 10 o'clock at night suggested they can run. That's what it is. And these birds are not lit, and that violates all the basic traffic rules. So I hope you can somehow work through this and solve it, because it would make the situation around Norman a lot safer. Thank you.
Hubert Street. Sorry. Kamala Jolly Stewart, 621 East Hubert Street. I was watching the city council meeting at home, and I did not plan on coming up here tonight, but after what I just witnessed, I felt the need to come up here and address all of you. I watch a lot more city council meetings than probably many citizens, and I've seen you all work together at various levels of disagreement and unity over time. And I just want to urge you, regardless of how long your term on council will be after the elections we just had, to show respect for one another and follow the processes. What I saw tonight felt like dramatic and like forcing an issue, but the only issue that I saw that it forced was that you showed that you don't trust each other enough to talk about these things before it gets to this point. And I just want to say to all of you that your job is to represent the city, and you should be modeling respect for one another while you're doing that. That's all I have to say.
Want to dispense with that, that's just fine. I know people would like to get on to the watch parties, and does anybody have anything they really need to say before we go? All right. With that, I will adjourn the meeting.